Poor girl thought she was helping a lost dog, but it belonged to the richest CEO in town. She thought she was just helping a lost dog, but the moment her fingers touched his soaked collar, she had no idea she was about to change the life of the richest man in the city, and her own. What started as a simple act of kindness would unravel buried secrets, unexpected love, and a choice that could tear everything apart. Before we continue, if you enjoy touching and inspiring stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Now let's get back to the story. The dog looked lost, but it was the look in its eyes. Tired, soaked, and quietly pleading, that made her stop. Clara didn't even hesitate. She dropped her grocery bag right on the wet sidewalk, knelt down, and whispered, "Hey there, buddy. Where did you come from?" It was raining hard, one of those heavy spring showers that blurred the streets and drowned the city in gray. But even through the storm, the golden retriever stood out like a beacon, fur matted from the rain, tail twitching low, a frayed blue collar around its neck with no tag. Just a tiny silver key hanging where a name should have been. Clara hadn't planned on rescuing anything today. She was already late. Her part-time shift at the bookstore was starting in 20 minutes, and she still had to drop off the medicine for her mom. But there was something in that dog's trembling silence that mirrored the way she felt every time she passed the gleaming towers downtown. Out of place, unseen, alone. She took off her sweater and wrapped it around the dog's back, slowly standing up as she held onto the leash made from an old phone cord she'd just found in a puddle. "Let's get you somewhere dry." Inside her tiny apartment, the dog wandered carefully, sniffing at everything like it had never been in a space so small. Clara filled a bowl with water and cut up a few leftover chicken strips. He ate like he hadn't seen food in days. "Who do you belong to, huh?" she asked gently, brushing her fingers through his wet fur. "What's this key for?" The silver key dangled from the collar, glinting faintly under the flickering kitchen light. She'd never had a dog, couldn't afford one. The building didn't allow pets, and her landlord was already threatening eviction if she missed rent again. But tonight, none of that mattered. The dog, she decided to call him Leo, had curled up by her bed, eyes half closed, like he'd finally found what he'd been searching for. The next morning, she called the local shelter, then checked social media for any posts about a lost golden retriever. Nothing. She printed a flyer at the bookstore and tacked it onto a pole near the corner where she'd found him. By the end of her shift, Clara had convinced herself maybe no one was looking. Maybe Leo was just a stray, and maybe, just maybe, he could stay. That illusion shattered 2 days later. It happened in the most unexpected way. Clara was at the park, walking Leo under the pale afternoon sun, when a sleek black car pulled up at the curb. A man stepped out, tall, sharply dressed in a gray suit that probably cost more than her month's rent. He looked around, phone pressed to his ear, before his eyes locked on the dog. "Leo?" he called, voice sharp, commanding. The dog froze, then bolted, not away, but straight toward him, barking joyfully, tail wagging like it hadn't in days. Clara's heart dropped. She was still gripping the leash, which jerked her forward as Leo ran. The man hung up the phone and crouched to embrace the dog. His face, hard and unreadable a second ago, softened into disbelief. "You found him," he said, standing up, looking at her for the first time. His eyes were the first thing she noticed. Deep hazel, intense, but not in a threatening way. More like someone used to getting what he wanted, who suddenly didn't know what to say. I didn't know he had an owner," Clara stammered. "There was no name tag, just that weird little key." He held out his hand. "I'm Adrian Cole. He's mine. And that key." He paused, then smiled faintly. "It's personal." Of course, Adrian Cole. She'd seen the name on skyscrapers, in business magazines at the library, the richest man in the city. And she'd been feeding his dog leftovers and sneaking him in past her cranky landlord. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to keep him. He looked lost. And I thought—" "You saved him." His voice was quiet. "He got out during the storm. I've been searching for 3 days. You did more than anyone else." He knelt down again, checking Leo's paws, then looked up at her, eyebrows slightly raised. "Would you come with us? Just to the vet? I want to make sure he's okay. And it might help that he trusts you." Clara blinked. Was this real? She should have said no. She had errands, her mom was waiting, and this man belonged to a world she couldn't even imagine entering. But something in Leo's eyes, and Adrian's, made her hesitate. "All right," she said softly. The car smelled of leather and mint. Clara sat stiffly in the back while Adrian spoke to his assistant on the phone. But then he turned to her, voice lower. "You know, Leo never likes anyone, not even the dog walker." Clara smiled. Maybe he just needed to be lost for a while. Adrian looked at her like he wasn't sure what to say next, like something about her didn't fit with the world he was used to. And yet, he couldn't look away. By the time they reached the clinic, Leo was asleep with his head on her lap. "Clara," Adrian said as he stepped out, offering his hand to help her down. "I think I owe you more than just a thank you." But before she could answer, a woman came running from the clinic doors. Blonde, in heels too high for the sidewalk, clutching her phone. "There you are!" she shouted at Adrian, ignoring Clara entirely. "You missed the board meeting and we're already behind on the merger." "I'll call you later," Adrian said curtly, then turned to Clara, his voice softer. "Will you wait?" Clara looked down at Leo, then back at Adrian, and nodded. She didn't know why. She didn't belong in this life, but something had already shifted, and she could feel it, deep down. This wasn't the last time they'd see each other. Clara wasn't sure what felt more surreal, the silence of the upscale vet clinic, or the way Adrian Cole kept glancing at her, like she was some kind of puzzle piece he couldn't quite figure out. Leo was okay. That's what the vet said after a quick checkup. Slight dehydration, a scratch on his paw, nothing serious. Adrian insisted on paying for everything, even when Clara awkwardly tried to refuse. "It's the least I can do," he said as they sat together in the waiting room. "You took care of him better than anyone else ever has." Clara offered a small smile, but inside she felt completely out of place. Everything around her gleamed. Marble floors, chrome fixtures, and silence that cost more than she made in a month. She was wearing a patched-up blouse and her only pair of decent jeans, while Adrian looked like he'd walked out of a fashion ad even in his simplest outfit. "So, what happens now?" she asked quietly. "You take him home and that's it?" Adrian glanced at Leo, who was curled up on the designer rug, tail flicking in his sleep. "Maybe," he said slowly. "But he never liked being home. Or maybe he just never liked what home felt like." She caught it, the flicker in his voice, a kind of sadness that didn't fit with someone like him, the kind that's usually kept locked away behind boardrooms and bodyguards. Then he said something she never expected. "Would you consider staying with him a few more days, just until I sort some things out? He clearly feels safer with you." Clara blinked. "You want me to keep your dog?" "Not keep, just look after. I'd compensate you for your time." "Handsomely." She almost laughed. "I can't take your money, and honestly, I'm not even allowed pets in my building. My landlord would lose his mind." Adrian frowned like the concept of being told no was foreign to him, but instead of pushing, he leaned in slightly. "Then stay at my house." The world froze. "Excuse me? My place is huge. Plenty of space. Leo stays with you there. It's temporary, a simple arrangement. I'm barely home anyway." She stared at him, then at Leo, then at the exit. This was insane. Wild. Maybe dangerous. Who was she to trust a billionaire? And who was he to trust her? But the truth was, she didn't have many options. Rent was overdue. Her mom needed medication. And that part-time bookstore job? It wasn't even covering food. Maybe it was a mistake, or maybe this was one of those once-in-a-lifetime moments that changes everything. Clara took a breath. Okay, but if he gets uncomfortable, I'm out, no questions. Adrian smiled, a real smile this time, one that didn't belong to magazine covers or business meetings. Deal. The next morning, Clara arrived at the Cole estate with a backpack over her shoulder and Leo trotting beside her. The wrought iron gate opened on its own, like the house had already decided to let her in. And it was, without a doubt, a mansion. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Art that probably belonged in museums. A garden that didn't even look real. But everything felt cold. Too quiet, like beauty without warmth. Without. Nervous? Adrian asked from the top of the stairs. He was wearing a simple black t-shirt and joggers. Still looked like a movie star. A little, she admitted. I feel like if I break something, I'll owe you the rest of my life. You get used to it, he said, half smiling. Or maybe you don't. I never did. She realized he wasn't talking about the house. He was talking about the emptiness. He showed her to a guest room with a view of the garden, a private bath, and even a plush couch for Leo. Make yourself at home. Use the library, the kitchen, the garden. Just don't go into the upstairs office, that's the only rule. She nodded. But of course, her curiosity was already burning. The days passed in a strange kind of peace. Clara spent mornings in the garden, afternoons reading in a library that smelled of old paper and fresh flowers, and evenings sometimes just talking to Adrian. They weren't long conversations or just bits and pieces, but enough to show her he wasn't what people probably thought. He liked jazz, he hated business dinners, and, most curious of all, he kept a small box locked in his office. A box the same size as the key Leo wore around his neck. She didn't ask, not yet. One evening it rained again. The sky turned dark early, and the scent of earth drifted in through the windows. Clara was in the kitchen, making tea, when Adrian walked in barefoot, hair damp from the rain. You cook? He asked, surprised, seeing her take cookies out of the oven. My mom taught me, she said, handing him a cup. She always said cooking is like telling a story. Every ingredient holds a memory. He accepted the tea. They sat quietly, the kitchen warm around them. Rain tapped gently against the windows, and after a moment, Adrian said softly, You remind me of someone. Someone good? The best person I ever knew. The air shifted. Clara felt something stir in her chest. Not butterflies, not quite. More like recognition. Something deeper than attraction. But before she could ask what he meant, Leo barked. A sharp, urgent bark from upstairs. They rushed out of the kitchen together, following the sound. It was coming from the second floor, the office. The door was open. Adrian froze. Clara looked at him, and in his eyes, there wasn't just surprise. There was fear. You opened it? He asked, his voice low. No, I swear, I didn't even try. I don't have a key. But Leo did. And beside the box, now unlocked on the desk, was a photograph. Clara stepped closer, slowly picking up the frame that had fallen. In it, a woman stood beside a younger Adrian, both smiling, arms around a younger Leo. Who is she? Clara asked gently. Adrian didn't answer. He didn't move. He just stood there, staring at the photo like it was the ghost of something he thought he'd buried forever. Adrian didn't speak for a long time. He stood completely still, shoulders tight, eyes locked on the photo, as if the memory itself might break if he blinked. The rain outside deepened, wind whispering against the windows like a voice from the past. Clara didn't move either. She could feel that this moment wasn't about curiosity anymore. It was about pain, old and raw. She was my wife, Adrian said quietly. The words hit the air like glass cracking. Eleanor. Clara didn't know what to say. The picture, the woman, looked vibrant, happy, alive. She was holding Leo in her arms like he was the most precious thing in the world. I didn't know you were married, Clara said softly. Most people don't, he replied, eyes still fixed on the photo. She died 3 years ago. Car accident. We were arguing before she left that night." His voice broke, just slightly. "I told her I needed space, that I couldn't think straight with her always questioning my decisions. And she left the house angry. I never saw her again." Silence followed. Heavy. The kind that wraps around a room and doesn't let go. "She loved Leo more than anything," Adrian continued. "She bought that key. Said it was silly. Said it didn't even open anything real. But she believed everything had a story. That even a fake key could lead to something worth unlocking." He sat down slowly on the edge of the desk. Leo walked over and laid his head on Adrian's foot, quiet and still, like he remembered too. After she died, Leo stopped eating. He stopped playing. I hired people to walk him, feed him, love him, but he didn't want any of them. He wanted her. Clara felt a knot in her throat. "And then he ran away?" Adrian nodded. "The night of the storm, I left the gate open, just for a second. I think he finally gave up waiting for her. Maybe he went looking." Clara reached out, gently placing the photo back on the desk. "And instead, he found me." Adrian looked up at her. His eyes were different now. Softer, haunted. "He's never bonded with anyone like he has with you. It's like he knew that you're like her." She blinked. "I'm not. I mean, I couldn't be." "You are," he said, voice low. "You love things you can't keep. You show up when nobody's watching. You feed lost dogs with leftovers and kindness. Eleanor did that too." Clara sat down beside him. The office, once forbidden, now felt like a sacred space, a room full of ghosts and unopened grief. "I'm sorry," she said after a while, "for everything you lost." "I thought I'd never feel anything again," he murmured. "Not like this. Not real. Not warm." The words sat between them, heavy and raw. And then, slowly, Adrian reached for her hand. He didn't squeeze it, didn't hold on tightly. He just touched it, like he was testing the world for something solid again. Clara let him. Over the next few days, everything changed, but nothing was spoken. Adrian was still busy. Meetings, calls, boardrooms, all the usual demands. But every night he found his way back to her. Sometimes they cooked dinner together, sometimes they just sat in the garden with Leo curled up between them, watching the stars flicker behind passing clouds. He never tried to impress her. She never tried to pretend. And that was the magic. One night, as they sat by the fireplace, Clara finally asked the question that had been stirring for days. "What happens when you don't need me anymore?" Adrian looked up from his cup of tea. "What do you mean?" "When Leo is fully okay, when things go back to normal, what happens then?" He paused. "What do you want to happen?" Clara hesitated. She'd been asking herself the same question. She didn't belong in this world. Not really, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't just surviving, she was living. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I don't want to disappear." Adrian leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice steady. "Then don't." She looked at him. Really looked. At the man who was supposed to be unreachable, untouchable, cold. But he wasn't any of those things. He was broken and healing, and so was she. Before she could respond, the doorbell rang, loud, echoing through the quiet of the house. Adrian frowned. "That's odd. I'm not expecting anyone." Clara stood with him, uneasy. Together they walked to the door. When Adrian opened it, a tall man in a black suit was waiting, holding a thick manila folder. "Mr. Cole," the man said with a stiff nod. "You're being summoned." "Summoned? Your uncle passed away this morning. You're now the sole heir of Coltech International's global branch in Switzerland. The will includes an immediate relocation clause." Clara froze. Adrian's eyes widened. "You're saying I have to leave? Now?" The man nodded. "Next week. It's non-negotiable. Your presence is legally required for transition." Silence slammed into the room like a door closing. Clara stepped back instinctively. The air around her turned thin. Adrian looked at her, then at the man. "Can you give us a moment?" The man nodded and stepped outside. Clara stared at him. "So, that's it?" "No," Adrian said, taking a step forward. "Not if you don't want it to be." "I don't belong in Switzerland." "Adrian, I don't belong in any of this." "You belong with Leo," he said, voice low. "And if I'm being honest, I don't want to go without you." Her heart jumped. "You'd take me?" she whispered. He didn't hesitate. "Yes." But then Clara looked down. She thought of her mother, the bookstore job, the apartment that still smelled like lemon cleaner and rain. Her whole world, small and complicated and real. "I need time to think," she said softly. "I'll wait," Adrian said. But deep down, they both knew time wasn't the problem. The days that followed felt like the calm before a storm. Everything looked the same, but something under the surface had shifted. Clara felt it in the way Adrian walked slower when she was around, in the way Leo wouldn't let her out of his sight. But most of all, she felt it in herself. She was falling for him, and that terrified her. She'd told herself she didn't belong in his world, but every minute spent inside it made that line blur. His mansion didn't feel cold anymore, not when she filled it with music or laughter, Leo's happy barking. And Adrian, well, Adrian had stopped pretending. He let his guard down. Slowly, but surely, he shared stories over dinner, let her see the collection of vinyls Eleanor had left behind. He told her about growing up in a family where silence was more common than affection, where wealth came with chains instead of comfort. And Clara listened, not with awe or pity, but with presence. And that's what Adrian noticed the most. She didn't treat him like a CEO or a man with power. She treated him like someone trying to be whole again. But the clock was ticking. His flight was booked. Switzerland was waiting, and so was her life, the real one, outside these walls. One morning, Clara stood by the kitchen window holding a cup of tea. The garden stretched out beyond the glass, green and alive, but her gaze was distant. Her phone buzzed on the counter, a text from her mom. "Landlord came by again. He's not being nice. I didn't tell him where you are." Clara's chest tightened. She hadn't realized how long she'd been gone, how far this new life had taken her from the one she'd built out of necessity, struggle, and love. Adrian entered, hair tousled, still in a t-shirt. "You okay?" She nodded, but it wasn't convincing. He didn't push, just waited. Finally, she looked at him. "What happens if I say yes?" Adrian raised his eyebrows. "If I say yes to going with you," she clarified, "to Switzerland, to whatever this is becoming." He walked over slowly, leaning against the counter beside her. "Then we go, together. I'll help with your mom. We'll figure it out. I don't want to force you into anything, Clara. But I don't want to lose this. You, us." Her eyes welled up. "It sounds too easy." "It's not," he said gently. "It won't be. But I'd rather fight for a difficult truth than live in a comfortable lie." She turned toward him fully now. "I've lived my whole life trying not to need anything too much, not to want things I couldn't keep. But with you, Her voice faltered. "I'm scared it won't last." Adrian stepped closer. "Then let it be real while it does. Let's not waste what we found because we're afraid of what we could lose." That afternoon, Clara went back to her old apartment for the first time since everything began. Leo stayed behind with Adrian. It felt strange walking through her neighborhood again, like slipping into a version of herself that didn't quite fit anymore. Inside, the apartment was small, warm, and messy with real life. Her mom sat on the worn-out couch, a blanket over her knees, half watching an old movie on the flickering TV. "You came back," her mother said with a teasing smile. "Thought you'd run off and married a millionaire." Clara laughed softly, but there was a truth behind it neither of them wanted to say out loud. She sat down beside her. "He asked me to go with him." Her mom didn't look surprised. "And what did you say?" "I haven't. I don't know. It's not just me anymore. It's you and this place and everything that's always kept me grounded." Her mother reached for her hand. "Clara, if I've taught you anything, it's this. Don't let your roots become your chains. I'll be okay. You deserve something more than survival." Clara's eyes filled. "I just don't want to lose everything. I am chasing something that might not be real." Her mom gave her a look, that knowing motherly look. Sometimes the only way to know it's real is to leap. That night, Clara returned to the mansion. Adrian was in the garden, throwing a ball for Leo. The moonlight softened everything. The grass, his silhouette, the way Leo bounded through the darkness like he'd never known sadness. She walked toward them slowly. Adrian turned at the sound of her steps, and he knew before she spoke. "I'm coming with you," she said. And his expression, it was more than relief. It was gratitude, joy, something near awe. He didn't say anything right away, just walked toward her and took her hand. "You won't regret it." But before they could embrace, before the moment could settle, Clara's phone buzzed again. Another message, from an unknown number. "You don't know who he really is. Don't go." Her smile faded. The warmth around her froze. Adrian noticed the change in her face instantly. "What's wrong?" She showed him the screen. He stared at it, and for the first time since she met him, he looked afraid. "We need to talk," he said, jaw clenched. "There's something I haven't told you." The garden felt colder now, even though the breeze hadn't changed. The stars above blinked as if they too were waiting for an answer. Clara stood in front of Adrian, phone still glowing in her hand, the words, "You don't know who he really is. Don't go," replaying in her mind. Adrian looked pale. Not guilty exactly, but like someone who'd been preparing for this moment and still wasn't ready. She broke the silence first. "Who sent that?" "I don't know," he said, "but I can guess." They went inside. The warmth of the house felt fake now, like a stage set suddenly revealed to be hollow. Clara followed him into the office, the place she wasn't supposed to enter, the place that had already changed everything once before. Adrian pulled open a drawer in the desk, took out a file, thick and worn. He handed it to her. "This is the part of my life I don't advertise," he said quietly. "I didn't hide it from you to lie. I hid it because I was trying to forget." Clara opened the folder. It wasn't what she expected. No scandals, no criminal records, just paper after paper, reports, contracts, lawsuits, all about the Coltech Foundation. "You run a charity," she said, confused. "I inherited it," he replied. "But for a long time I didn't run it. I let someone else take control while I focused on growing the company." "And? They stole millions, laundered it through shell companies, fired staff without warning. Eleanor found out. She was going to expose it." Clara looked up sharply. "That night, the night we argued, it was about that. I told her to leave it alone, told her she was risking everything. She told me I was becoming just like them." His voice cracked. "And then, she was gone. Car crash. I never got to fix it, never got to prove she was right." Clara's throat tightened. "So now you're trying?" "I took the foundation back, fired the entire board. I'm under federal investigation. Not because I'm guilty, but because I should have known. I should have acted sooner." She looked at the papers again, this time with new eyes. It wasn't scandal he'd hidden. It was shame. "That message," she whispered. "Probably one of the families affected," he said. "Or someone who lost their job. They're right, in a way. You don't really know who I am." "I think I do," Clara said softly. "You're the man trying to make it right." Adrian sat down, burying his face in his hands. "I thought if I just gave enough, rebuilt enough, maybe I'd deserve peace again." Clara knelt in front of him. "You don't earn peace by punishing yourself. You earn it by letting someone see who you are, and not walking away." He looked at her then, truly looked, eyes wide, raw. "You're not walking away?" She shook her head. "Not unless you push me." He exhaled long and deep, like he'd been holding his breath for years. The days leading up to the Switzerland trip were quiet, but not heavy. Clara stayed by his side, helping sort through files, phone calls, even emails from victims. Some were cruel, some were hopeful. But Clara noticed something. Adrian didn't shy away. He replied to everyone personally, honestly, with regret and resolve. Leo, sensing the shift, never left their side. One night, they stood on the balcony outside Adrian's room. The city lights below flickered like a sea of tiny fires. "You know," Clara said softly, "when I found Leo in the rain, I thought I was saving him." "You did," Adrian replied. "No," she smiled. "I think he was leading me to you." Adrian turned to her, his voice rough with emotion. "If I had never met you, I'd still be hiding in this house, living in guilt, pretending I was fine. And if I'd never met you," she said, stepping closer, "I'd still be surviving instead of living." The kiss came slowly, not rushed, not dramatic, just honest, the kind that feels like coming home after a long, lonely walk. The morning of the flight arrived. Clara stood in the guest room, backpack packed, heart pounding. She looked around once more, at the room that had changed everything. Leo waited by the door, tail wagging with quiet excitement. Adrian entered, rolling his suitcase. "Ready?" She nodded. "As I'll ever be." But as they approached the front gate, a car screeched to a stop outside. Clara flinched. 3 reporters jumped out, cameras flashing, microphones ready. "Mr. Cole, are the allegations true? Did your wife's death have anything to do with the foundation? Who is the mystery woman with you? Is she part of the cover-up?" Adrian stepped in front of her instantly. "Get off my property," he barked. "Now!" But the cameras kept flashing. One reporter pushed a little too close. Leo growled. Clara stepped forward, face calm but firm. "He's not hiding anything. Not anymore." The reporter's expression flickered, surprise. Then slowly the cameras began to lower. "Funny," she looked at Adrian. "We don't have to run. We can face it." Adrian smiled, proud. "Together?" "Always." They walked back inside. Adrian made a call, delaying the flight. He turned to Clara. "We do this the right way. Full statement. Open everything. Start clean." She nodded. "And after that? We go?" Adrian took her hand. "Yes, but this time not to run from anything. To build something new." Clara looked at Leo, who tilted his head like he understood every word. They didn't need a plane to start over. They just needed the truth. And each other. The press conference was Adrian's idea, but Clara was the reason it mattered. They stood side by side on the steps of the Cole Foundation's headquarters, the city buzzing with murmurs and distant camera clicks. Reporters were everywhere, waiting like hawks. The morning sun broke through the clouds just enough to cast a warm light on Adrian's shoulders, but his voice was what silenced them all. "I failed," he said. "No opening statement, no script. Not just as a CEO, but as a husband, as a human being." Clara stood off to the side, Leo at her feet. Her heart beat faster with every word, but not from fear, from pride. Adrian spoke of Eleanor, not her death, but her courage. He spoke of the board he let run wild while he looked the other way. He named names, accepted blame, announced the full release of all internal documents and the formation of an independent oversight committee, chaired by one of the whistleblowers. The crowd was stunned. No one expected a confession. Fewer expected redemption. But Clara saw it coming. She had seen the cracks in his armor. She'd seen the man beneath the legend, and now, so had everyone else. After the press cleared, after the dust of confrontation settled, they returned to the mansion one last time. Everything felt different now. No secrets, no pretending. Just 2 people and 1 dog, standing in the ruins of their old lives, trying to build something new. That night, Clara found Adrian in the garden again, staring up at the sky. "Was it enough?" he asked, not looking at her. "Will they forgive me?" Clara stepped beside him. "Maybe, maybe not. But forgiveness isn't something you earn with words. It's what you choose to live up to every day after." He nodded slowly. "And you? Do you forgive me?" "For hiding things?" she asked. "For almost becoming someone I swore I never would." Clara thought for a moment, then took his hand. "You didn't become him. You changed. You're still changing." He looked at her, like she was his answer in a world full of unspoken questions. They didn't kiss this time. They didn't need to. They just sat on the bench, Leo curled between them, and listened to the quiet. The day before the flight to Switzerland, Clara returned home one last time. Not because she had doubts, but because she needed closure. She sat with her mom, packed a small box of memories, photos, letters, her first library card. "Are you sure about this?" her mom asked, hands gently folded in her lap. "I've never been more sure of anything," Clara said, "but I needed to say goodbye to who I was, the girl who always played it safe." Her mom reached out and touched her cheek. "You've always had that fire in you." "Clara, he didn't light it. He just helped you stop hiding it." Later, as she left the apartment, her mom stood in the doorway. "Don't forget where you came from," she said. "I won't," Clara promised. "But I'm ready to find out where I'm going." They flew out that evening. The plane was sleek and quiet, the city shrinking below them like a memory. Clara sat beside Adrian, watching the clouds stretch endlessly ahead. "Do you think it'll work?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "This?" Adrian glanced over. "I don't just think. I believe." Leo barked softly in his sleep beneath their feet. "I still feel like I'm dreaming," she admitted. "Like I'm waiting for someone to tap me on the shoulder and tell me I don't belong here." Adrian reached across the armrest and took her hand. "Then I guess I'm dreaming too, because I can't imagine any of this without you." She smiled, a slow, steady smile that came from deep within. "You know, I think Leo knew before we did." Adrian laughed. "Smartest one of us by far." The rest of the flight passed in quiet contentment, each mile taking them further from the lives they'd once lived, and closer to something neither of them had expected. They arrived in Lucerne, where the Alps met the lake, and the sky never seemed to end. Adrian's new position came with yet another estate, but this one was different, smaller, warmer. Clara's touch was all over it within days. Fresh flowers on the windowsills, books piled on the coffee table, Leo's toys scattered across the floor. They weren't just living together, they were building a life. Adrian still worked. Clara volunteered at a children's library near the town square. On weekends they took long walks with Leo, sometimes without speaking, just knowing they didn't need to fill the silence anymore. But it wasn't perfect. They argued sometimes about little things, about how he still carried too much guilt, about how she sometimes doubted herself, but each time they came back stronger, because now they weren't afraid of the hard parts. They knew love wasn't about avoiding the fall. It was about holding on when you hit the ground and helping each other up again. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Adrian brought out a small velvet box. Clara's breath caught. "No," he said quickly, chuckling. "It's not a ring. Not yet." He opened it, and inside was the silver key Leo had once worn on his collar. Polished now. Gleaming. "I had it turned into a necklace," he said. "Thought maybe you should wear it." Clara stared at it, heart thudding. "Why?" "Because you unlocked everything I thought was lost." Tears welled in her eyes, not sad ones, the kind that come from being seen. She leaned forward, let him clasp the necklace around her neck. The key rested against her heart, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was pretending to be strong. She just was. A year later, no one in Lucerne called her the girl who saved the CEO's dog anymore. She was just Clara, The woman who ran weekend reading circles at the Lakeside Library, who baked cinnamon muffins for the cafe next door, who walked the golden retriever that everyone swore smiled more than most people. But in the quiet corners of her heart, Clara still remembered. She remembered the rain, the look in Leo's eyes, the moment she knelt down and thought she was saving a lost dog, when in truth, it was him saving her. Adrian had changed too, not overnight, not all at once, but in steady, deliberate ways. He worked fewer hours, laughed more, hosted monthly open forums at the foundation, where survivors and former employees shared their stories and helped steer future projects. He never spoke of Eleanor publicly again, but every step he took now honored her memory, and Clara was never in her shadow. She stood beside him, not as a replacement, but as proof that grief and love can coexist without canceling each other out. They hadn't married, not yet. But one Sunday morning, as fog rolled across the lake and the sun melted it slowly into gold, Clara sat with Adrian on their porch, wrapped in a blanket, Leo's head resting on her knee. "I used to think love was something you fell into," she said. He looked over at her. "And now? Now I know. It's something you choose, every day, especially on the days when it's easier not to." Adrian smiled. "I choose you." She rested her head on his shoulder. "I choose you, too." That afternoon they visited Eleanor's favorite overlook, a quiet cliff above the lake where the water shimmered like stained glass. Adrian brought a single daffodil. Clara brought the necklace. They stood in silence. "I still talk to her," Adrian said softly. "She still hears you," Clara answered, with quiet certainty. They didn't need closure. What they needed was peace, and they'd found it, not by erasing the past, but by living fully in the present. Before they left, Clara tied the key necklace gently around a tree branch. "She gave it to Leo," Clara whispered. "And Leo gave it to me. But maybe now, it can just belong to the story." They walked away hand in hand, never once looking back. A few weeks later, Clara found herself on the bookstore steps back in her hometown. Her mother's health had improved. The landlord, surprisingly, had softened. Clara had come back to visit, to breathe in the old streets one more time. Not because she missed who she used to be, but because she wanted to remember the girl who had risked everything for something as simple as kindness. The same girl who believed a lost dog was worth stopping for, even when she had nothing to give. As she walked past the bulletin board outside the shop, her eyes caught a flyer half-ripped by rain. "Found, golden retriever. Friendly, no collar. Took him in, hoping someone's looking." Clara smiled. She pulled out a pen from her bag and scribbled beneath the photo. "Keep him, he might just change your life." That night, back in Switzerland, Adrian stood by the window with Leo watching the stars. Clara wrapped her arms around his waist from behind. He placed his hand over hers. "You ever think about how close we were to missing all this?" she whispered. "All the time," he replied. "If Leo hadn't found you..." Clara shook her head. "No, if I hadn't stopped." He turned to face her, a soft wonder in his eyes. "Why did you stop?" "Because he looked lost," she said simply. "And I knew how that felt." Adrian kissed her forehead. "You're not lost anymore." She smiled, pulling him closer. "No, I'm home." Some stories don't end with a grand proposal or a wedding kiss. Some stories end with quiet mornings, shared glances, muddy paw prints on clean floors, and a kind of peace that doesn't scream to be seen. It just stays. Clara thought she was helping a dog. She had no idea she was about to find the kind of love that doesn't rescue you from the storm, but waits with you inside it. Because sometimes, the best things in life don't begin with a plan. They begin with a choice. To care, to stay, to believe, even when the whole world says you shouldn't. The end. And now it's your turn. Have you ever taken a small risk, helped someone or something, and ended up changing your life without realizing it? Share your moment in the comments. I'd love to read your story.